I'm not entirely sure if this is a cinematic Icelandic thing or it's just a Hlynur Pálmason thing. But when I finished his film, The Love That Remains, I started with, oh, this is an entertaining, unique look at comedy and life and sex, a lot of sex. And then at the end, I'm thinking, this is the point of all of humanity. How is it possible that it spans that arc? This is very different than a lot of his other films, because the first thing that I thought of was, it's almost like if Wes Anderson grew up in Iceland, but was more reserved and somber and kind of pensive and looked down a lot and looked at the landscape. And there were times where it felt almost like this weird comedic attempt, or if maybe he was constructing this satirical look at comedies, you know, with the dog, Panda, and then with different things that the characters did. It wasn't anywhere near like a raunchy American, toilet humor comedy, but it felt like for him, for Hlynur Pálmason, if you know his work, it felt like a push in that direction, if that makes sense, which sort of threw me off at first. Just so you know, there will be some spoilers in this. But then the first piece of like serious, brilliant editing and filmmaking for me in this film was the moment where he showed the chickens and they were in this like sort of smaller, screen within a screen, and it was a split shot, but it was within the frame. There was blackness around it, and it looked like the chickens were filmed like kind of like with a Bolex 16 millimeter camera. It's probably too nerdy, but it had that moment of like, oh, I forgot we're watching someone who's a master of filmmaking, and this is the first step into it right here. Okay, so there's a lot of different little motifs and elements and characters that go into me having this huge epiphany at the end of like, this is the point of all humanity, perhaps. And we'll start with the mother. The mother's an artist, right? She invites this curator from a gallery somewhere, I think in Sweden, and he's such an arrogant prick. And he comes there, and it's just about him, and he talks. He doesn't ask any questions. He doesn't listen. He ends up stealing a goose egg. And remember, this whole family, kind of like Nest, they're perched on this, like, almost cliff in Iceland, right? So it's about nature. It's a huge part of it. Nature's a character in this film, like it is in so many of his films, right? So she's there, and she's working from there, and she invites this guy in, and he's like, just the narcissistic asshole kind of thinking of himself. He's there for himself. He's not even interested in her work when he leaves. He's like, we don't really have any room in our gallery, but thanks for the invite to this amazing place. And you get the sense that it's almost like a violation, that Palmason's showing this sort of violation between of the Icelandic landscape and this sort of way of life that's been going on forever, and this city folk, new person, new idea, industrial revolution, gallery, got to make money, grinding it out in that way, grinding it out on the city streets. That's a representation. That's what that guy represents, and he comes in here and violates the landscape. You get a similar thing from the father, they're not together, right? They're separated, but he's still hanging around because they've got kids. And he's a fisherman. He goes way out into the sea, right? It's dangerous. But there's a comment being made on the overfishing. He doesn't touch on it. He doesn't, he's not making a political statement, I don't think. It's just there. They're pulling in these mountains of fish. And there's a couple scenes where they have like a killer whale or two that are hanging around the boat, thinking, you almost feel like you can see the killer whale looking up and going, is this sustainable, what you're doing? Like what do you think's going to happen if this is one place, this is one village on Earth, right? That's pulling up all this fish. The killer whales you feel like are looking like, what are you doing with all this fish? Are you making a new planet, a new ocean that we can all swim in? Because we don't really understand it. Me and the boys been talking and we don't really get it. So there's another violation that you see on the seascape, or whatever the term is, like on the oceans, on the planet. Because Iceland I've never been, but it feels like this, this natural wonder that everyone goes to. Like it not only is nature, but it represents nature. And so these things that are happening are happening to the family and to the characters, but they also feel like they're happening to humans overall. But even when the dad's on the boat and he's out at sea, there are a couple moments where he's kind of by himself and he's pretending to surf or something. So there's a real playfulness, and that's where the comedy element comes in. That it's not just this like Godlandish, his film Godland, seriousness. You're seeing now people, characters who are there in the moment, understanding that we don't have much time, having fun, playing, enjoying being in the moment with their kids, with each other, with themselves. And all of these little motifs are running through their lives. Either they're creating them or they are them, or it's a balance between the two. And there's a really interesting motif with the stones. Now, the mom has these beautiful canvas that she lays out in a field, and she puts these metal pieces that are cut up in an artistic way, in a creative way, and laid on top of the canvas. And she puts heavy stones on them to keep them from moving. And what happens is that the rust from them, or the dirt or something, lines into the canvas in these weird, abstract, unexpected ways. I thought the artwork was really beautiful in it. There's also a scene where one of the roosters, I don't know how chickens work, but there's a rooster, a bunch of chickens, hens, and a rooster that's misbehaving, getting aggressive, and the dad kills him with a stone. And the daughter later on kind of hates that he does that. No, she doesn't kind of. She does hate that he does that, saying like, why did you do this, blah, blah, blah. But what struck out to me was that the stone was present in both of those situations, that it was taking a life, the rooster, and it was giving a life with the artwork by pressing down. It was almost became part of the artistic process. So there's a weird like circle of life thing happening with the stone motif. And the other big thing is the idea of arrows. Bow and arrows. Now, the kids set up this dummy on the Icelandic coast. They set up this pole, and they've got a dummy, and they're just shooting arrows all seasons long, and it's changing. And there's a really beautiful moment where they show arrows going into the dummy, and it changes season, night, day, winter, summer, whatever. And it's like a switch, and it reminds me a lot of Nest. If you've seen Nest, I don't know if it's like I don't want to say homage, but it just reminds me of that style of the changing landscape today, but the stationary, like the Nest treehouse and the Icelandic knight or whatever it is on the pole is getting hit with arrows. It's the same idea. But what's interesting at the end is that it's some sort of like dream state or symbolic thing. The knight, kind of funny too, that gets up and starts moving. Like, here's this thing that we thought was a dummy. And it is a dummy, but this is like some sort of weird surrealist painting or something where the knight gets up and walks into the house. And the dad comes home and finds blood on the door handle and then finds this knight in the house. And because the dad's so horny, going back to the comedic thing of the comedy and the sex, starts saying, hey, are you a girl or what? And starts making out with the dummy. It was a really weird and interesting thing because obviously it's a dream of some sort, but we don't really, some of it, as we get towards the end, we don't really know what's real and what's symbolic, at least for me. Just to go back for a second, one of the reasons the dad is imagining coming home is because prior to this, or right around there, the brothers are shooting arrows and one of them accidentally shoots the other one and he's okay, but he shoots him in the chest. And he goes to the hospital and it's fine. But that's why the dad had come back. And this takes us to the end, which is really strange and bizarre. But apparently on the fishing vessel that he's on, one of the things they have for an emergency to get someone, let's say they got to go back to their hometown, something's happening with their kid, or they got to go back for some reason. They put him in like a David Byrne Stop Making Sense outfit where it's just floating. They push him overboard, tell the coordinates to some sort of chopper, and he's got like a device or something, I assume. And he's just floating in the sea as the ship comes up because you can't stop getting that fish. You can't stop that production. And that's the system. What gets really weird, of course, is that I don't know if this is symbolic or it's literal, But before the guy goes overboard because his kid got shot with an arrow, he had a fight with someone on the boat, right? There's an argument. Like they grabbed each other, fisticuffs, and the guy gives him advice later on if they kind of make up, and he's saying you got to be with your family. You're only here for a moment. You gotta treat, the people you love with respect and kindness and give them your time. And I don't know if he was the one in charge with throwing him overboard, but it's kind of implied that the guy either didn't call in, the chopper, or gave him the wrong coordinates or whatever, because the dad is just floating. And so he's just floating there, not knowing what happened, slowly realizing, I'm going to die here. And that's credit rolls. And then you're thinking, this is such a weird way to end it, but it's haunting and kind of beautiful too, because he's sitting there thinking, and the really heartbreaking moments when he says he's sorry to each of his family members. And it sounds like I'm describing, the darkest movie that was ever made. But again, I can't tell if maybe it's this Icelandic sense of humor. I have no idea. But to me, it was dark. And so where all this led for me is thinking about as I'm going through this filmmaker who's making these incredible shots, incredible edits, and he's such a unique filmmaker. He's doing things that nobody else is doing. The way he's cutting things together is amazing. The way he tells a story is so unique. I can't think of anybody who's doing it like him. I can't think of anybody ever, especially in the modern era, who's doing these kinds of things with the cutting and the shots and the framing and the messaging and the way that he's telling a story. It's like this pointillistic, at times, way of piecing these shots together that when you step back and look at it, it makes sense. But if you're close to it, you kind of think in the moment, what's happening here? And so as I'm watching this, I'm thinking, I'm going from that smaller arc of comedy, sex, to watching people slowly, because there's a lot of moments of thought and reflection, like in all of his films. And at first I'm thinking there could be a couple of things happening here. The first angle is he's saying life is not really that different. Like, sure, technology is better, medicine's better, but in terms of meaning and purpose, not much has changed. So you've got the people in the 1500s and the BCE 500 or whatever, they're still going through the same things: love, breakup, kids, jealousy, money problems, boredom, excitement, whatever, death. And that hasn't really changed. We don't have huts anymore. We have roofs, and we have couches instead of like hay bales or whatever. But at the core, it's the same. That's one angle. The other angle, and I don't think that he's saying this, but I'm just saying this is what I took from it, is that, okay, it's the same, but really it's just a different part in an ongoing process that we can't see. So in other words, George Carlin has the joke about how maybe humans were here just to make plastic. Like, that was our point. Like, the dinosaurs were here to make, fossil fuels, to give us the energy to make plastic and petroleum, whatever. And so it just goes on and on. We're on the chain, right? So it's this long process that we can't see when we're in it, because we're just ants gathering little materials or whatever, doing our part, but it's for this greater purpose. Like over the course of 300,000 years, we're seeing the transformation from caterpillar to butterfly, but we're in mid cocoon and we can't see it, and we're not outside the cocoon, so we don't know. And I'm not saying that Palmason is saying this, but that's what I took from it, because you're seeing these different depictions of life, not just in this film, but like through his other works, like through Godland, which is like the old days where the priest and everybody's like going through the terrain in the old days. What's the difference between then and now? There are many, but in terms of meaning and purpose, it could be the exact same, that we're all contributing to this greater thing that we can't see. That's what I took from it. So let me know what you think. I thought it was great. I loved it. It's on Criterion. It's from 2025, but they just released it on Criterion, like at the time of this recording, spring of 2026. So whenever you're watching this, maybe it's more widely available. But right now, it's on Criterion. But I want to know what you think. Of anything that I've said, was there anything that resonated with you? Did you get some of the similar feelings of what it was, and that it was so different than his other films? Because it felt different to me. Still beautiful, but it wrapped up in kind of a similar way to his style or his vibe. So just put it in the comments below. Let me know what you think, what you thought of what I had to say. Let's talk about it. Let's hash it out. Let me know what you think of him as a filmmaker. I think he's one of the most original people out there. If you don't know his films, maybe you watch a few of them, come back, let me know what you think. All right, Hlynur Pálmason, The Love That Remains.